Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. Got a few things I just want to discuss briefly before we get into our herb of the week. First of all, it was brought to my attention by a really nice lady about a week and a half ago that some of my books from Amazon had a bit of a problem. It seems that within the last 6 months ago or so, there have been some formatting issues, some printing errors with some of my books coming from Amazon. I got in touch with the right people and I figured out what I needed to do, and I literally spent hours on each book completely reformatting it, making sure that the text was coming out as large as it was supposed to be. Something was going on that was making the text too small. Uh, the page numbers were also not appearing correctly. There were several issues, weird spacings and margins, and that's all fixed now. So all 7 of my books are now exactly as they should be. If you look at the preview online, this is exactly what should show up in your house. It was a huge inconvenience. I wish Amazon was a great deal more responsive and actually worked with the authors that they profit from instead of just leaving it up to chance and making us figure it out. But on the bright side, those are fixed. And if you happen to get a bad copy, if you need to return it to Amazon and get a new copy, I understand. Okay. That will, temporarily take a little money out of my pocket, but it should all work out in the end. That's okay. I want you to have a good copy if you're still within that window where you can do an exchange. And if there is a problem, please take care of that right away. If that window has passed for you, if it is closed, if you can no longer do a free return and get a new copy without costing you any more money, please email me. You can email me southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com or judson@judsoncarroll.com. Just give me the title and date of purchase, and I will send you a free PDF copy. For the next couple of weeks, I'll just do that free of charge. Anyway, let's just go ahead and take care of that. And from here on out, my books will be perfectly good to go. You can buy them with confidence, and there should be no more of this. The formatting just got really screwed up, and it's fixed now. So that's number one. Number two, it is the middle of July and it is hot and the garden is coming in like crazy. Everything's coming in like crazy. And, there are a few things like a few vegetables that actually have medicinal herbal properties that we often overlook. One of the most commonly thrown away, discarded things out of a vegetable garden is corn silks. Corn silks are the little tassels at the top of an ear of corn. Dried and made into a tea are the very best herb for bladder infections, cystitis, urinary issues. So be sure to dry and save your corn silks. They have a few other properties, but that one is primary. And right now, I am picking parsley like crazy, trying to get what I can before it bolts. Parsley is a biannual. It will grow the first year, die back, come back in the second year, and then set seed. So I plant parsley every year. I love parsley. Parsley is the most common herb I use in cooking. And, most people probably really don't even think about parsley. They take it for granted. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I was told the garnish of parsley on a plate, when we went to a steakhouse or something, was just an ornamentation, a garnish. But I had also been taught to eat everything that was put on my plate, so I would eat the parsley, and I developed a real taste for parsley. And it turned out that it wasn't just a garnish. The tradition of putting parsley on the plate is because parsley helps you digest your food in times before refrigeration, that parsley could help prevent food poisoning. It actually has some strong antimicrobial properties. It helps settle the stomach, helps with digestion, it helps with flatulence, it helps with all kinds of stuff. Parsley is just a wonderful herb. Um, Let me just run through just a few quick properties here of parsley. All right, so I've discussed before all the many uses of parsley, but I mean, this just commonly overlooked herb has been used medicinally for thousands of years. Thousands of years. It's a diuretic. It helps with bladder stones, kidney stones, what they used to call gravel. It is good for the liver. It helps with jaundice. As a diuretic, of course, it helps with dropsy, which is edema, the fluids collecting in especially the legs, the ankles, the lower extremities. Oh, it's also good for cystitis and bladder infections. Parsley is a great detoxifier. It helps the body get rid of toxins through the urine. It's full of vitamins. It's actually very potent in vitamins. Um, it can stimulate menstruation, so pregnant women should not use parsley in what would be called medicinal quantities. I mean, using parsley as an herb in your food is probably okay, but hey, look into that for yourself, make your own decision. But I think, most people eat parsley and don't think a lot about it. What I'm talking about here is a strong parsley tea or a parsley tincture or just like literally sitting down and eating a whole salad of parsley, which I actually do sometimes. I like parsley that much. Parsley can be used to, make a tea out of it and wash your hair with it, and it'll actually help you get rid of dandruff. Parsley actually is known for its anti-dandruff effects. It's antispasmodic. It can help with cramping. It's carminative. That means it settles the stomach. Digestive, diuretic. Emmenagogue brings on menses. It's expectorant. Parsley actually helps clear the lungs of mucus. It's galactofuge, which means it reduces lactation. Good for the kidneys, stomach, the liver. Um, and actually, the seed can be used as a galactagogue to stimulate lactation. So it actually has two different properties between the top of the plant and the seed, and was commonly used in Europe. A few hundred years ago, a tea would be taken, after the child was born to help promote lactation. And kind of odd. As an herbalist, I know dozens of herbs that stimulate lactation, that bring on lactation, that increase lactation. And you would think with the shortage of formula, baby formula, people would have been asking me about this, but I actually put that out there like probably a dozen times on Facebook. I mean, not Facebook, Twitter, and other social media sites. You know, if you can feed your child breast milk and you need a list of herbs that can help, send me an email. And not one single person took me up on it. In fact, I got insulted a lot. A lot of women saying, "You men don't know anything. I need my baby formula." Okay. Um, and then a few days later, they were complaining about, the same mothers who use formula exclusively for their children were complaining that they had to use goat milk as if it was something disgusting. Yeah, okay. I understand a lot of babies cannot consume milk and they need their formula. A lot of babies can, and maybe if we were feeding the babies that could have milk, there'd be more formula left over for the ones that actually need it and can't have milk. I made that point, and my word, they came out of the woodwork screaming at me. I mean, you have to adapt. I'm sorry, you have to adapt to circumstances. Yes, it's more convenient to use bottle formula. Yes, some women have to use bottle formula. Some women were convinced by their doctors to take medication to prevent lactation. Some had to go to work early. I understand all of that, all of that. I'm not shaming or disparaging anyone for the choices they make. But it is also true that infants that are raised on their mother's milk have stronger immune systems, better, well, less chance of cancer, fewer digestive issues, fewer allergies, better brain development. What am I supposed to say? Yeah, I get it. You're upset. The government screwed everything up. The plant that was supposed to make the formula shut down, and the government won't do anything to fix it, and you're angry about it. But as humans, actually our um, signature capacity is adaptation. You know, many philosophers have said that throughout the years. When things change, we as a species can actually adapt and learn. And, maybe if you're a young mother, or maybe if you're a young woman and you think one day you might have a baby, maybe you want to get a list of herbs that actually stimulate, increase the flow of milk, etc. And there are other herbs that actually dry up the flow of milk. Okay. It's a very natural process. And for some reason, whether it's society or actually a lot of doctors and nurses. I mean, I spoke with a Catholic mother who had many kids. And it was like every time she went to her OB/GYN, all that stuff, and the pediatricians, okay? The pediatricians especially were telling her, you need to stop breastfeeding your children. Why would they say that? I mean, she knew that those children would be healthier if they were breastfed. The pediatrician just kept giving her samples of formula and giving her all, and the nurses would actually like shame her. And it all kind of fell apart when the COVID vaccine came along and she said, I'm not comfortable with this COVID vaccine for my children. And they basically told her, you need to find another doctor. We don't want you anymore. So now she drives several hours away to go to a pediatrician who will specifically use vaccines that were not made from aborted fetal cells. She had a big issue with that, understandably, as a Catholic. Regardless what Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden say, the Catholic Church says abortion is murder. No ifs, ands, or buts. It is the taking of a human life and is an absolute mortal sin. But that's another issue for another day. If you're a faithful Catholic, you should know that already. And so she had an issue with taking these vaccines made from aborted fetal cells. Uh, but when she got to her new doctor, who actually understood her concerns, that doctor's like, "Oh, it's wonderful you're breastfeeding your children. You're making a great sacrifice. You're being the best mother you can be, and your children will be healthier and stronger." Why would one do everything they could to disrupt what was natural and replace it with something from a chemical company? Well, it all has to do with money. If you don't take their drugs, if you don't take their vaccines, if you don't use their baby formula, you're not making the money. The money is what's running the entire system. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's just an aside. I just think, there are some great books out there by Rosemary Gladstone, Susan Weed, so many others about herbs for women's health, about herbs for pregnancy, herbs for early childhood development. They discuss these herbs for lactation in great detail, far more detail than I'm ever going to get into. I'm not that knowledgeable or that comfortable talking about women's issues. But it was quite a shock that when I put out a statement, oh, by the way, if you're having trouble breastfeeding, I know a bunch of herbs and I can send you the information and you can research instead of people saying, oh, wow, this is great, especially in the time when we really need it. It was, you horrible man, what are you proposing? You expect me to actually breastfeed my own children? You know nothing. Get out of here. Okay. Yeah. So Anyway, let's get back to the topic at hand, which was parsley. Parsley is actually a tonic to the kidneys and stomach. It's a tonic for digestion. It helps improve appetite. A poultice applied topically is good for bites and stings, and actually has some anti-cancer properties. Parsley is a fascinating herb, far too often taken for granted. I think I've mentioned before on this show, my grandmother was really sick. She'd had a couple of heart attacks and she was just fading, and, her appetite was not what it should be. She was not getting enough nutrition at all. I found that when I cooked for her, if I put a little parsley in the food, her taste buds have become dulled with age. So you kind of lose your sense of smell, your sense of taste as you get older. If I put a little parsley in the food, she didn't really notice the parsley, but the food tasted better to her. And she started having more energy and gaining weight and getting healthier and being able to get up out of the chair and walk because she had nutritious food, which she hadn't had because all they wanted to give her was, Ensure and other, sweet nutritional beverages. And she was sick and tired of drinking sweet things. She wanted something that had some savory flavor to it. And, doing a little research, it seems that parsley and celery, especially the celery leaves, both of those plants, which are closely related, and several other plants in that family, umbelliferous family, have certain essential oils which carry the flavors of food up the back of your sinuses to your nose and enhance the taste as you eat. It's an old wine and beer vendor's trick, according to the great George Herder, that you would put celery salt or parsley on cheese and cracker to serve with the wine and beer, and people thought the wine and beer tasted so much better they would sell more of it. That's it really interesting that it was used as such because in that time period that he was discussing, caviar was actually given away free in saloons to get people to drink more beer. Imagine that. Imagine going into a cheap neighborhood bar full of cowboys. It's in the old west, and they're handing you a dish of caviar to get you to drink more beer or whiskey. So caviar, like the most expensive, next to saffron, I guess probably the most expensive food we eat, a true delicacy, gourmet delicacy, was considered like dirt cheap. The celery and parsley would have actually been, a little bit more expensive. And the wine vendors were using that on cheese, which would also have been more expensive, to help sell their beer and wine. So there really is a lot to parsley. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll tell you one of the best ways, if you have a lot of parsley, like if it's starting to bolt like mine is right now before it seeds and I'm trying to harvest it before it gets a little tough and bitter. And I've got, first year parsley coming in too. I can harvest a whole bowl full of parsley almost on a daily basis because I really like parsley. I plant a lot of it. One of the best ways to use it is so simple, so simple. Okay. In a pan, put equal parts butter or olive oil and plain flour, all-purpose flour. Make a roux. Okay, just stir it together and cook it. The flour mixture will bubble a little bit. The raw flavor and odor will leave, but don't cook it so long that it gets brown. This is called making a white roux. To that, um, add a whole bunch of parsley and some milk. Make a cream sauce with that roux, stirring the milk in, and adding all that chopped parsley, and then just serve it with some pasta. A little salt and pepper, some garlic. Cook some garlic in with that roux. Excellent. You can saute some shrimp, maybe do some chicken. You top it with Parmesan cheese, and you've got pasta Alfredo, but a very parsley heavy pasta Alfredo that I think is just absolutely fantastic. You can even skip the roux and do a dish of just pasta, parsley, Parmesan, and black pepper, and it's just absolutely delicious. Again, maybe some chives, a little garlic, sure, shallot, whatever you got, some green onions, some scallions, anything to kind of perk that up. But with a glass of white wine and on a hot summer day, what could be better? I mean, honestly, you can use any kind of meat you want. You can use no meat at all. You can use seafood. The main flavors coming together are the parsley and the butter or olive oil, the Parmesan, a little salt and pepper. It's just so good, so good, and really a great way to use a whole lot of parsley from the garden. So now let's get to the herb of the week. and it's very appropriate. It is what I would call the humble chicory. Now, chicory grows all over the place in the mountains where I live, and what I'm talking about is the wild version. The wild version of chicory looks like a blue dandelion. It's a taller, weedier plant than dandelion. The flower just looks like an aster or a dandelion. It's, just a simple flower with rays and in the petals and all that. It looks like a blue dandelion. Sometimes it can be slightly lavender, but check your um, check your identification with a field guide. Usually they should be blue. Lavender does tend to be more of an aster, but the chicory is such a really interesting plant. This same flower that, well, it's just a weed for most people. An herbalist will use the roots and such as a bitter tonic. It has wonderful bitter medicinal values, very much, like I said, like dandelion. The two are almost used interchangeably. Um, in Belgium and France and various European countries, that Italy and such, that same plant was bred through years of work into endive, endive, um, a wonderful salad herb, a wonderful cooked green. The bulb of the plant, I would say the bulbous base of the leaves really makes it like a head of almost a small lettuce or something. And you can blanch it. You can grow it in the dark so it stays perfectly white. And it's just a wonderful flavor. It's not overly bitter. It's got a little sweetness to it. It's just a really, really good vegetable. Okay. Now, in early America, though, chicory found a much different use. The roots, when roasted, form a tea that is essentially a coffee substitute. Now, I don't like it as a coffee substitute. People say that both, chicory and dandelion can be used in place of coffee. I don't think so. I mean, I like my coffee. I've actually talked about this before. Um, Chicory root is an excellent complement to coffee. If you want to try the very best, in my opinion, and I am sure there are some small boutique roasters in Louisiana that do an even better job, but it's called community coffee. You know, there are other companies like Louisiana that use chicory. They're great companies. They do a lot of great community work and charitable work. I would not wish to disparage them whatsoever. And Louisiana makes some excellent tea. Their coffee is bitter and awful, in my opinion. I mean, like I said, great company. If you like them, more power to you. But I think their coffee is horrible. Uh, Community Coffee is also based in New Orleans, and they roast the chicory just to the right amount. They combine it with a French style dark roast coffee, and taken on its own, it's good. You notice that the coffee has a little bit of background sweetness, a little more rich flavor. Okay, it's not worth buying if you're just going to drink it as black coffee. Honestly, that's again my opinion. If you add some milk or cream to that coffee and just a tiny bit of the liquor of your choice. I am fond of bourbon, but brandy will work just fine. Irish whiskey is probably even better. Uh, just a tiny bit. You could probably even use like some vanilla extract or something. I mean, you don't have to make a cocktail out of it. But what they call Creole coffee was consumed for hundreds of years in Louisiana by people closely related to me, the Creoles. And what they would do was they'd get up in the morning and they'd have to go out and work. So they'd have a little snack, they'd come in and have a big breakfast. But at both meals, they were having some coffee, and they'd take a flask of coffee with them. And it would be this dark roast coffee mixed with chicory, cream, and a little bourbon or brandy. And they carry it around with them all day and just, sip on it from, say, before dawn until lunch. And they weren't getting drunk or anything. It was just a nice way to keep the body stimulated and keep some calories going in, and it made work more pleasant. I still think that's not an unhealthy thing to do. I know it's very much against the grain of our modern culture, where you're only supposed to have alcohol after 5, but you have to remember that not only was early America, but all of Europe. Um, founded by the greatest thinkers ever lived, the greatest philosophers, architects, all of modern Western civilization, up until about 1900, was essentially built by people that just drank beer from morning to night and had cocktails and had wine with their meals. I'm not advocating heavy drinking, of course, and don't drink and drive and don't be dangerous, but I think maybe our kind of puritanical values that really set in during Prohibition really shifted the culture to where people drank a lot more in great quantity after five. You know, people worked all day and they were tired and they would drink a bunch of cocktails and get drunk. Uh, as Whereas before people would maybe sip on a little beer throughout the day. I mean, traditional English breakfast has beer with it. You know, beer used to be very commonly uh, consumed. I mean, even in Puritan New England, Protestant minister's salary included so many gallons of beer and rum per week. The pub, the tavern, the meeting house is where our founding documents were written. I mean, we would not have an American Revolution, a Constitution, a Declaration of Independence, etc., were it not for taverns. And I mean, to the point where, you know, in again, Puritan Protestant New England, they mandated that there be a tavern within so many feet of every church in every town because the tavern was where people got together and met. It was the center of community. It was a place for people to be warm in a cold winter. It was a place where they could get food and drink if they were poor, if they were traveling. The uh, convivial and regular consumption of alcohol is what Western civilization is founded upon. It was only after it was made illegal for a period of time that people really started binge drinking and drinking themselves to death, and alcoholism became a serious problem. And then, you know, some people, honestly, I see this a lot among my uh, Pentecostal holiness friends, you know, and somewhat among Mormons as well. You know, I have friends in these churches, and I'm not disparaging them at all. The very strict, absolutely no alcohol. Some of them no tobacco, no uh, caffeine, no soda, and basically, if you screw up one time, you're damned. They can be very rigid in that way. And I have actually met a whole lot of Pentecostal holiness and Seventh day Adventists and Jehovah's Witness cocaine addicts and heroin addicts because, you know, they need something to give them some comfort. They need some of the helps that God gave man. And having had something that's kind of controllable and not terribly destructive unless used to excess and irresponsibly taken away, they fill that with something a whole lot worse. Um, Not to call out anybody by name, but you know, if you listen to my show, I did a couple of semesters at Liberty University, Southern Baptist University in Virginia. I was, you know, good friends with Dr. Falwell. I mean, you know, a lot of good people there. While I was there, I saw a lot of people get into really hard drugs and really really perverse sexual activities, a lot of cheating, you know, um, a lot of infidelity toward their partners and swapping of partners and such as that. You know, if you take away those simple things that God gave us as a help to get through life, people tend to turn to more destructive things because what isn't natural becomes the only thing they have. You know, again, I'm not disparaging anyone. It's totally your choice. And none of my business whether you drink or not. You know, I couldn't care less. Uh, the My Bible has the passage in it that God gave wine to gladden the hearts of man. Withhold not wine and strong drink from the aged and the sick, and even was it St. Paul? Just going by memory, said take a little wine that's good for the stomach. I think the teetotaler movement, which is actually very anti-Catholic at its heart, a lot of those laws that were passed to outlaw alcohol were done so, supported by the Ku Klux Klan and the eugenics movement, because Catholics, we have to have wine at communion. And so uh, there's a really screwed up history there. Something you want to look into, go for it. I happen to think that a little community coffee with a little bit of milk or cream and just a tiny little, not even a half a shot of bourbon is like the best thing on earth. It is the best Irish coffee you will ever have. It is, it's got the richness, the bitterness of the coffee. It's got a subtle sweetness. There are actually these chocolate and vanilla flavors that come out in it. And, it's just incredibly good, especially on a cold winter's evening, to have that hot cup of coffee with just a little bit of alcohol in it. It's fantastic. I'd rather have that than a sweet dessert any day. That actually is the other reason. The other thing that people substitute for alcohol is sugar. You know, we had a we now have an epidemic of diabetes and heart disease. We didn't have that before Prohibition. When people drank more alcohol and ate less sugar, they were a lot healthier and lived longer lives. And if you don't believe me, look up something called the French paradox. The French drink, I think it's about 3 bottles of wine a day per person on average. And this is on average, like all the women and children and old men put together, and you find the average among them. Um, they eat much more butter and fatty foods, a lot more meat, a lot more duck and goose, good fatty, rich duck and goose. And they smoke a lot more. They smoke a lot more tobacco. The average French person does smoke cigarettes, whereas nowadays the average American does not. And yet the French have lower heart disease, fewer instances of diabetes, much less cancer, and live longer than the average American. Why is that? I think probably a lot of it does have to do with diet. I also think it has a lot to do with not walking as much. The French walk around a lot more than Americans, but they have a completely different lifestyle, and I just think what comes natural tends to be more in a line with what's better for us. All these chemicals and all these processed foods and all these things that doctors say are better for you tend to lead to sickness, illness, shorter lifespans, miserable, unhealthy, unhappy lives. I think we just really need to get back to basics. I think if there's one overwhelming, overriding message in my podcast, it's we really need to get back to basics. Uh, Diet, exercise, work, family life, morality, politics, you name it. We need to get back to what our ancestors knew 100 years ago. I mean, you can look at my family tree. Almost all my great 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 grandparents saw that if they weren't killed in a war, they lived to be about 100 years old and had, you know, 10, 12, 15 children. And they were vigorous and hardworking till the day they died in their late 90s or maybe 101 or 102. You just don't see that anymore. And, those families lived in a community together and they passed on their values to their kids. And the grandparents helped raise the grandkids, and multiple generations had a shared culture and ideology and everything. And now everybody's just scattered all over the place. And I mean, drug overdoses in the millions, violent crime every weekend. You turn on the TV and you see, 30, 40, 50 people shot in Chicago. It's all falling apart. It's all falling apart. We've got to get back to the basics. But I guess I should talk a little bit about chicory. So, chicory was so popular among the ancient Greeks that it was written about by poets and philosophers. The ancient poet Horace wrote. Let's see if I can do this in Latin. Mi pascont olive, mi chicore, mi malve. Would that translate to? As for me, olives, chicory, and mallows provide the best substance. Sustenance. Olives, chicory, and mallows provide the best sustenance. So he lived on a pretty simple diet, and a lot of people have speculated that he had a bad stomach. If you think about, mallows are soothing, chicory's bitter. Yeah, his diet of olives, which are very, full, rich with calories from the olive oil, the fat, and then that simple, mild diet would have been just the thing for someone with a bad stomach. By the time Dioscorides wrote Materia Medica, chicory was already being cultivated as well as found in the wild, and he differentiates between the garden vegetable, which is the ancestor of our modern endive or endive, however you want to say it, and the wild chicory, which is still what we find in roadsides everywhere. He said that both, though, were astringent, cooling, and good for the stomach. He said boil with vinegar, they stop the discharge of the bowels, he meant diarrhea, and that the wild especially are best for the stomach, for when they are eaten, they comfort a disturbed and burning stomach. He also recommended it with polenta, which, okay, this is ancient Greece. It would not have been essentially Italian grits made of corn. This would have been a different gruel, essentially made with wheat or barley or buckwheat or whatever they might have had at the time uh, for heart conditions. He also recommended chicory for gout and inflammation of the eyes, and used topically to cure scorpion bites, believe it or not. St. Hildegard von Bingen, writing about 1090, 1100 AD. I'm not exactly sure which herb she meant. She had an herb in her old style German she called Sunny Werble, and we're not sure if that was chicory or dandelion, but it was combined with burdock, just as we would use those same herbs today. And she recommended for digestive issues, liver, and skin health. So identical to how we would use it today. And as I said, we can really use chicory and dandelion mostly interchangeably. By the time we get into German folk medicine, Father Nape specifically mentioned chicory as having the a blue flower. He said it's somewhat more pale than cone flower. He said it's somewhat more pale than corn flower, which, if you compare the two, you'll start to see both of them in the wild, actually. And um, he said it was good for the stomach. He said a tea dissolved coagulations. He said a tea dissolved conglutinations of the stomach. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I think he's basically talking about indigestion. And he said it stimulated gall and bile and purified the liver, the kidneys, and the milt, which is actually the sperm, by the way, and secretes unhealthy matter through the urine. The dose is 2 cups full a day, he said, taken in the morning and in the evening for 2 or 3 days. He also recommended it being used topically as a compress for pains in the stomach or inflammations. And most interestingly, he recommended basically a liniment, steeping the dried herb in like rubbing alcohol, basically, to be used for consumptive or dwindling limbs. That means, well, it could be slight paralysis, or he's really talking more specifically um, an atrophy of the limbs. And he said a liniment made with chicory, used 2 or 3 times a day, would help strengthen and build up those limbs that were withering away. He actually had tuberculosis himself, so if he recommended that, there's probably a lot to it. Although I honestly don't know how that would work. It would definitely be worth trying if maybe you had a stroke or something and you had a paralyzed arm or leg or whatever. Give it a shot. What do you got to lose, basically? I mean, modern medicine can do very little for such conditions. And his protege, Brother Aloysius, he said a leaf infusion was recommended for constipation, mucous stomach, and excessive gall. He said it cleanses the liver, spleen, and kidneys, stomach, and promotes digestion. A tincture of the root in 75% alcohol is used externally to rub weak limbs twice a day. Take 2 cups of tea made from the leaf decoction as an excellent remedy for a mucous stomach, for it encourages digestion and puts the stomach in order again. So again, he also recommended it for chest congestion. And going back to Dioscorides, we're seeing mentions of it for lung complaints and congestion. But again, he mentions that external rub for weak limbs. So that's another source. I think it's very well worth looking into. And Gerard in the 1500s said it was good for a hot or inflamed liver, to help the stopping of the gall, for yellow jaundice, good for lack of sleep. And again, sometimes lack of sleep can be caused by indigestion or liver inflammation. So that may be how it helped in that way. Also good for the stopping of the urine and for hot burning fevers. And he also recommended just the leaves bruised, placed over the eyelids for inflammation of the eyes. So that can be very useful, obviously. And by the time we get to Culpeper in the 1600s, the endive, or garden succory, as they called it in England, was essentially just a garden vegetable. It really was not being used so much for medicinal properties anymore. But the wild chicory, or succory as he calls it, he said was an herb of Jupiter, and it would open more than the garden variety. I think he basically just meant it was stronger. He said a handful of the leaves and roots boiled in wine or water and drank fasting, or taken on an empty stomach essentially, was good for choleric and phlegmatic humors. A pretty archaic way of looking at things, but essentially he said the same thing. It opens obstructions of the liver, the gall, and the spleen, helps the yellow jaundice, and was a diuretic, helped with urine and dropsy, edema, bladder and kidney stones. He said that it would help those that have an evil disposition in their bodies. So if you have an evil disposition in your body, it will help, apparently. But he also said that taken in wine, it was good for long and lingering fevers. Also for swoonings and passions of the heart, and the heat and headache in children, and good for the blood and liver. So he saw it as somewhat as a cure-all. Bruised leaves applied outwardly, he said, helped with swellings and inflammation. St. Anthony's fire, um, pushes, wheals, pimples, and especially when used with a little vinegar would be good for various dermatological complaints and infected sores. He also recommended it for inflamed breasts and to increase the abundance of milk. He also recommended it for inflamed breasts and those that were swollen and pained by what he called the abundance of milk. So that's one we would consider probably reduces lactation. You see, these herbs have very many uses that unfortunately people don't even seem to want to hear about anymore. By the time Miss Grieve comes along in the 1930s, she had researched chicory all the way back to the ancient Arabs, who probably originated it. You remember how I mentioned that chicory, when the root roasted, has a subtle sweetness? It actually contains inulin. Inulin is, you could say, it's sort of an indigestible sugar. It's a sweetness that is subtle, that does not affect blood glucose levels. We also find inulin in Jerusalem artichokes. It can be a little hard to digest. Jerusalem artichokes are notorious for giving people a whole lot of gas, but that inulin is very useful for diabetics because they can get a little sweetness that does not spike the blood sugar. Well, the ancient name of chicory in the Arabian tradition was Inubus, comes from the same word. She mentions how in England and Belgium and France at the time, it was mainly being grown as a vegetable, but that of course, the wild plant still had many uses. But as far as edibility, which was she was really focused on. She said the leaves are useful in salads, for which they are much superior to dandelion. And I have to admit, I love dandelion salads. I love to take my dandelion greens, especially sometimes I just eat them fresh, just as I would a lettuce or something. I put a little bacon grease on there and a little bit of maybe some balsamic vinegar or a rice wine vinegar, a few herbs. It's one of my favorite salads with some onions. And she said that chicory leaves were better than dandelion. I tried it. I found them to be quite good. I would not say that chicory leaves are better than dandelion. I would say they're just as good, maybe a little sweeter sometimes. And so, what I normally do when I'm gathering my dandelion, if there's chicory nearby, I just throw them in together. I just basically use them interchangeably. And I will throw in some flowers too. I'll take some of the yellow dandelion flowers and some of the blue chicory flowers. It makes for a very pretty salad, which is also really, really good for you. As for medicinal uses, she says the root, when dried, is used in the same manner as dandelion and well, obviously has a bitter taste. She said its action is tonic, laxative, and diuretic. If you like bitter salad greens, if you like radicchio, which is also related to the chicory, definitely get some endive and grow it in your garden. I think it is, well, I really think it's great. I think these are really delicious, delicious salad greens, very good cooked as well. It's very common in France to have endive, just the whole head, essentially, cooked in some chicken stock, maybe a little cream sauce. Very nice. This is a great one to grow in the garden. It's also just a really good herb to learn to forage. Blue is the least common color among flowers. Even purple is a little more common than blue. So if you're going out and you're looking, I mean, I can spot chicory from probably 100 yards away driving down the road. Once you learn to identify it, you will see chicory growing all over the place. And, it's got great medicinal values. It can be used as a coffee substitute if you really have to. It can be used to make your coffee better. And it's a nice wild edible. So, last week I was driving around, went through, I think I was passing through Watauga County. I may have been in Catawba County. So, just thinking of that area, I went from, say, 4,000 feet elevation down to about 1,000 feet in that drive, maybe even a little lower. Um, it was July and hot, and I saw chicory everywhere. So, I can't speak for what's going on at the coast right now, but I can pretty much say in most of the United States right now is a really good time to go out and look for chicory. It's in full bloom. Get your basic field guide, use a plant identification app, look it up online. Really hard to mistake this plant. It's like a scruffy blue dandelion. It grows taller, it's weedier, it doesn't the plant itself doesn't look like a dandelion, but the flower looks like a scruffy blue dandelion. So get out there, find it, enjoy it. Please buy my books, especially now that I've had to reformat them all. I'm going to lose some money. And if you're sitting on the fence about buying a book of mine, it's a really good time to go ahead and buy one. And like I said, if you have bought one and you need an ebook, because yours was in a format that was screwed up, I understand. Just email me and I'll take care of that right away. Y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.